Should members of Israel's military be invited to Britain for training courses during the genocide in Gaza? Joining me to discuss this is my colleague and editor of Declassified UK, Mark Curtis.
Hi, Phil. Thanks for having me.
Mark, you wrote an article a few weeks ago now in which you revealed that Israeli troops were in the UK currently, and not just stationed at the embassy as a defence attaché role, but also on training courses here as well, which I think will shock many listeners, given that Israel is under investigation at the World Court for plausible allegations of genocide. Can you tell us about that article you wrote for Declassified?
Yeah, what we found from looking through Parliament, actually, is that the British Ministry of Defence admitted that there are 6 Israeli military officers currently in the UK. And some of them appear to be based at the Israeli embassy, and others are on military training courses where they are being trained by the British Armed Forces. We don't know what those courses are because the government has refused to tell us. There was another parliamentary question put down, and the Ministry of Defence said they were withholding the information as to what the nature of those military training courses actually is. But obviously, it raises all sorts of concerns that, as you say, amid this genocide, far from actually expelling any Israeli military officers, Britain is actively training them throughout this period. That seems utterly extraordinary. No more extraordinary than the fact that we don't, I haven't seen this being reported anywhere else apart from by us at Declassified, actually, which is also fairly par for the course, I have to say, in the way that the media has failed to report the reality of the British-Israeli military relationship in recent years. That's another scandal in itself. But certainly this is something which I think should concern all of us, the nature of this military cooperation that's taking place as we speak, and which the government refuses to provide any details about. There is a history to this over recent years. It seems that in about 2019, 2020, there were agreements made between the UK and Israel to step up military collaboration between the two countries. There was a military agreement signed between the UK and Israel in December 2020 that was actually publicized on the Israeli side, but the British government really did not publicize this at all. They clearly were being very secretive about it. And indeed, they have refused to reveal the true nature of that agreement. They've refused point blank to publish that agreement. The only thing we do know is what the Ministry of Defence has admitted to. They have said that it calls for that agreement. It calls for more joint exercises and joint training, and it does call for the strengthening of military ties between the two countries. But beyond that, we don't have details about what it entails. But these current military officers based in the UK appear to be, I think it's very likely that they would be part of that agreement that was secretly signed a few years ago.
Defence Minister at the time when the agreement was signed was Ben Wallace, who's recently stood down. And he's been quite outspoken and critical of the IDF's conduct in Gaza in recent months, particularly for a Conservative former cabinet minister. And we had a little interaction with him on Twitter when we asked him, given you're so concerned about what the IDF is doing, do you regret signing this military agreement with them back in, 4 or 5 years ago now? And can you tell us what's in it? Because it's secret. And does it implicate Britain in Israel's atrocities in Gaza? And he just replied, obviously it doesn't. And of course, we went back to him and I said, well, it's not obvious, is it? Because the agreement's secret. So we'll just have to take your word for it. But again, this is another issue, this wall of secrecy around the UK military's relationship with Israel. So we don't know exactly what courses they're on because they won't tell us. I should say normally they do tell us. MPs ask questions about military training courses given to our allies all the time. And often we get a breakdown. With Saudi Arabia, for example, we had a very detailed breakdown of all the types of military training that Britain was giving to Saudi officers here. It's not just coming on to things like Sandhurst, to the famous military academy. It can be very specific training on, how to call in airstrikes. So these could be skills of direct relevance to the atrocities that we see in Gaza at the moment. Mark, do you remember back in 2019 there was a bit of a fanfare around a large RAF exercise in the UK that Israel was invited to? And I think, am I right in saying that was the first time that Israeli fighter jets came here and did a joint exercise with the RAF?
Yeah, that was, as you say, this exercise that's called Cobra Warrior, which is an annual exercise, and it was held in 2019, I think, from RAF Waddington in Lincolnshire, which was the first time that F-15 fighter jets, combat jets from Israel, took part with the Royal Air Force in this joint military exercise. It was reported by Haaretz, the Israeli newspaper, and they reported that the Israelis were practicing what were called simulated ground attacks over the UK with the Royal Air Force. And this is F-15 fighter jets. So, I mean, this raises real concerns now because, I mean, these F-15s have been repeatedly used in Gaza to bomb Palestinians. And the fact that they were actually training to conduct simulated ground attacks, which is precisely what they're doing in real life now in Gaza, is a real issue. You know, the fact that the RAF has been working with these Israeli pilots. So it would seem that the kind of instruction and exercises that the Israelis have picked up in Britain have been of, very potentially of direct use in this brutal war now. And not just the RAF, actually, because in recent years, the members of the Israeli army have also been trained in the UK. In 2018 and 2019, for example, British ministers admitted that there was army training going on in the UK. We don't have details again. Details weren't released about how many Israeli IDF officers were in the UK at that time, and we don't have details about the courses that they were on. But clearly, there has been a close military training relationship in the last few years, and it is distinctly possible that some of the tactics, strategies being taught by the RAF and the army are now being put into practice in Gaza.
And something that we've been highlighting, particularly during the current conflict, is the flights from the RAF base on Cyprus, RAF Akrotiri. There are spy flights going almost on a daily basis over Gaza, as well as more secretive cargo flights landing in Israel and where the details of the cargo aren't being disclosed. Another aspect that actually came out, I think, in the Sunday Express newspaper, which is a very kind of pro-Conservative Party newspaper, was a suggestion that Israel's fleet of F-35s, which are their most advanced fighter jets, which we know have been used to bomb Gaza extensively, had access to a maintenance facility in RAF Akrotiri, and that access has now been suspended over concerns about Netanyahu's plan to invade Rafah, the southernmost part of Gaza, where thousands and thousands of refugees have been told to shelter in a supposed safe zone. But, we're trying to get more details about that report, but that could be a huge area of complicity if actually since October the 7th, the UK has allowed Israel to maintain its fighter jets at a Royal Air Force base on Cyprus.
Absolutely. And that was frankly news to me because I hadn't ever come across any servicing of Israeli fighter jets from RAF Akrotiri on Cyprus before. I just never seen that. I mean, if that's been going on, if that's kind of part of the relationship, if that's kind of a normal feature of what's been happening over the last few years, that's also a very significant factor in my view. And yeah, I mean, our colleague Matt Kennard has done fantastic work in revealing the role of the UK's base on Cyprus in the current war on Gaza. I think it's 48 military aircraft we've now been able to track from the RAF that have gone gone to Israel, mainly from Cyprus, since the Hamas attacks of 7th of October last year. 65 spy missions that have been flown by the British over the Eastern Mediterranean and Gaza since then. And Matt's also revealed that this story about 9 Israeli military aircraft have landed in the UK since 7th of October, and the government has refused to disclose what is on those aircraft, what they're carrying, what the purpose is of those aircraft being in the UK. We deserve to know what's going on, particularly during a genocide where Britain is so complicit and British ministers are so obviously complicit in Israeli war crimes, given the amount of diplomatic support and military support that they are providing to Israel.
If people want to read your article, they can get more details there on our website. And if you want to help Declassified to keep doing this kind of investigative journalism and gathering this evidence that lawyers can pass on to bodies that are supposed to be investigating these war crimes and British complicity in them, please head to our website and you can support us from £3 a month, subscribe to our YouTube channel and join our newsletter. Thank you for watching.